Welcome back to America Trends here on U2 America. Glad you're with us tonight. Hey, President Trump announced some big new tariffs on China today on $50 billion worth of goods. We're going to be talking about that and some other stuff with Tom Delbacaro coming up. He's of Political Vanguard. Also talking about what to look for in a nanny or in any sort of child care professional, if that's what you're in the market for. So stay with us for that. But first, we are talking about financial issues with Jacqueline Newman, friend of the show and matrimonial expert out of New York City. She's also a divorce lawyer, and there's her website, nycdivorcelawyer.com. She's got great information for us today on 5 signs of financial abuse in marriage and what women need to watch out for. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being here with us. So you say what women need to look out for because you say primarily they're the ones that have this happen to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's more often women than men just because we're still in a situation where men are more often than not the primary breadwinners, and you still have a lot of women that play more of the traditional role. So that, financial abuse is something where someone will use the control of money in order to control the person in the relationship. So unfortunately, it still is probably affecting more women than men, even though it can affect men, but again, more women than men probably.
Jacqueline, I bet it can be subtle. It's probably happening to women or maybe men, and they might not even realize it. They just think it's what marriage is about.
That's true, and that's why it's, financial abuse is one of the types of abuse that's probably least recognized. I mean, you have physical abuse, where obviously everybody knows what that is, because there's a lot of after-school specials on that. And emotional abuse is really getting a lot of headlines now, too, so people are aware of that. But financial abuse is still a little bit in the shadows. And really, it's one of those things where, again, someone's controlling money, but it's hard to identify because it may just be that, the man is in charge of the money and the woman, doesn't play as much of a role in that. And therefore, she just assumes that this is the way it's supposed to be, as you said. But sometimes it really can be an issue of abuse.
And you say it is related to emotional abuse in a way.
It is, because again, it's an issue of control. And a lot of times when people are in emotionally abusive relationships, they'll do that, they'll put people down, they'll be abusive, they'll say bad things about them, all really to be able to control. So financial abuse is just another way to do that.
So what does it look like? What specific things might a woman look for that you think she should try to notice and pay attention to?
Well, one of the first signs I would say is that when women are in what I call the financial dark, they're really just completely unaware of what's going on financially. Now, again, if there's a woman that, plays that role in her marriage, it doesn't mean she's being financially abused. But if she wants to know, and her husband is saying, no, you know what, you don't need to worry about that, this is something I take care of, that could be being left in the financial dark. So that would be, I'd say, number one. Another thing that people want to look for is if, you have a husband that gives out an allowance to his wife. He says, you get, $100 a week or whatever it is you get a week, and that's all you get. And so when it's doled out that way, it could be something that could be seen as an element of control. Again, I'd like to put the disclaimer out that if people are living on a budget and this is kind of what they decide to do, so be it. But if you have the husband who's out shopping at Barney's and you have the wife that has to be shopping at Kohl's, that might be an issue. And that might be an issue of, doling out allowances and really being financially abusive and controlling.
And you say actually using those allowances for tit for tat, keep the house clean. That's no good. Yeah,
no, that's not a good thing. And to that end, another issue that some people want to look out for is when you have to account for every penny that's spent. I had a case once where, the husband was making many millions of dollars a year, and the wife had to literally produce receipts for every pencil she bought for her son for school supplies and things like that. When you have to really account for every single penny spent, that's another element of control. Again, if you're on a budget and you want to basically everybody be on the same page, so be it. But then it's got to be reciprocal. It can't be just on one person.
Sure. Sometimes if one partner is primarily responsible for sort of taking care of the kids day to day, the other spouse might not even realize how much she is spending on the child.
Oh, that's absolutely true. It's amazing how much money you spend. I mean, we live in New York City, and I say it costs $20 when you walk outside to breathe the air. So you really don't know what's being spent. And I think that when you have one person who's primarily taking care of the children and buying ice cream and buying this and buying that, and then you have somebody who's just not spending money in that same way, they feel like it's just frivolous and it's just going out the window and, money doesn't grow on trees, and then everybody gets into that kind of battle.
What other extreme cases have you seen besides having to account for every pencil she bought?
Well, another thing that you see about, for financial abuse is when you have somebody who guilts the other party into not working. So what I mean by that is you'll have a situation where, let's say, the wife leaves the workforce for a couple of years to help raise the children, and then she wants to go back. And then you have the husband who will say, you know, you're a bad mother for doing that, or will really make her feel so badly about the idea of going back to work. And if that's what she wants to do and he makes her feel badly about it, that could be an issue. And that could be another element of control. And one of the reasons he may be motivated is he doesn't want her to have the outside interest. He doesn't want her to be making money, and that might make him feel less useful in the marriage. And for her, you know, she feels that she wants to, you know, do other things. And if she doesn't, that's fine. And if everybody makes an agreement that, you know, the wife is going to play more of the primary caretaker role, that's perfectly fine if everyone's on the same page. But if they're not on the same page, then that's a problem.
We're talking to Jacqueline Newman, New York City-based divorce lawyer, who she's talking about the signs of financial abuse. And if that's happening and what you just described, how does a woman stand up or a man stand up to the other spouse? How do you counsel them, maybe?
You know, it's very difficult. I mean, it has to be recognized that there's abuse happening. I mean, that's the key. And if you recognize that the abuse is happening and this is an element of control, then that's when you need to be seeing a therapist. You need to be recognizing the issues in your marriage and doing things to get help, because you don't want to end up in my office.
Have you ever dealt with anyone or counseled anybody who had found that their spouse was stealing money?
So that's what I would say is probably one of the fifth signs, yes. You know, a lot of times what will happen is that if somebody, let's say, inherits money, let's say the wife inherits money, and that is considered technically separate property, that's her money. Now, it doesn't mean that she doesn't spend it on the marriage, but it's her choice to do so. And very often you'll see, you know, in a situation where we're talking about, the husband will say, well, I've worked and I've contributed to the marriage, the least you can do is put this money in. And that's fine if everybody agrees to it. But if they don't agree to it and he just goes and takes that money and spends it, then that's stealing. I mean, that's what that is. And that is another element of financial abuse.
And it also has to do with respecting your spouse enough to want to get his or her input and not just saying, this is how it's going to be, and this is what I'm doing with the money.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really the key and the crux to all of it, is the respect element, is to recognizing that people bring different things to the marriage and not trying to control each other. Everyone should have equal say. I mean, if you can respect that and listen to each other, then, you know, hopefully, again, you won't end up in my office.
Love and respect. Tell us your books as we head to break. We're going to hold you over. I want to talk with you. I want to ask you about how sometimes I've seen or heard about one spouse ruining the other person's credit score. And then if they head into a split, it can be a big deal. But tell us your books as we head to break, Jacqueline.
So I have one book that's for women, that's Soon to Be X, and the other book I have for men is Soon to Be X for Men. And both of them really are books that are directed toward each gender and hopefully will help people get through the really difficult process of divorce.
Okay, very helpful. Jacqueline, we'll see you after the break. We'll be right back on America Trends.